So understanding the human brain is undoubtedly coupled to how do we make better AI, because so much of AI has in fact been inspired by the brain. It may have taken 50 years since the early days of neural networks till we have, all of these amazing progress that we've seen with, deep belief networks and, all of these advances in Go, in chess, in image synthesis, in deep fakes, in you name it. But the underlying architecture is very much inspired by the human brain, which actually posits a very, very interesting question. Why are neural networks performing so well? And they perform amazingly well. Is it because they can simulate any possible function? And the answer is no, they simulate a very small number of functions. Is it because they can simulate every possible function in the universe? And that's where it gets interesting. The answer is actually, yeah, a little closer to that. And here's where it gets really fun. If you look at human brain and human cognition, it didn't evolve in a vacuum. It evolved in a world with physical constraints, like the world that inhabits us. It is the world that we inhabit. And if you look at our senses, what do they perceive? They perceive different, parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. The hearing is just different movements in air, the touch, etc. I mean, all of these things, we've built intuitions for the physical world that we inhabit. And our brains and the brains of all animals evolved for that world. And the AI systems that we have built happen to work well with images of the type that we encounter in the physical world that we inhabit. Whereas if you just take noise and you add random signal that doesn't match anything in our world, neural networks will not do as well. Yeah. And that actually basically has this whole loop around this, which is this was designed by studying our own brain, which was evolved for our own world, and they happen to do well in our own world, and they happen to make the same types of mistakes that humans make many, many times. And of course, you can engineer images by adding just the right amount of, sort of pixel deviations to make a zebra look like a baboon and stuff like that, or like a table. But ultimately, the undoctored images, at least, are very often, mistaken, between muffins and dogs, for example, in the same way that humans make those mistakes. So there's no doubt in my view that the more we understand about the tricks that our human brain has evolved to understand the physical world around us, the more we will be able to bring new computational primitives in our AI systems to, again, better understand not just the world around us, but maybe even the world inside us, and maybe even the computational problems that arise from new types of data that we haven't been exposed to, but are yet inhabiting the same universe that we live in, with a very tiny little subset of functions from all possible mathematical functions.
Yeah, and that small subset of functions is all that matters to us humans, really. That's what makes...
It's all that has mattered so far, and even within our scientific realm, it's all that seems to continue to matter. But, I always like to think about our senses and how much of the physical world around us we perceive. And if you look at the LIGO experiment over the last, year and a half, has been all over the news. What did LIGO do? It created a new sense for human beings, a sense that has never been sensed in the history of our planet. Mm-hmm. Gravitational waves have been traversing the Earth since its creation a few billion years ago. Life has evolved senses to sense things that were never before sensed. Light was not perceived by early life. No one cared. And eventually, photoreceptors evolved, and, the ability to sense colors by sort of catching different parts of that electromagnetic spectrum. And hearing evolved, and touch evolved, etc. Mm-hmm. But no organism evolved a way to sense neutrinos floating through Earth or gravitational waves flowing through Earth, etc. And I find it so beautiful in the history of not just humanity, but life on the planet, that we are now able to capture additional signals from the physical world than we ever knew before. And axions, for example, have been all over the news in the last few weeks. The concept that we can capture and perceive more of that physical world is as exciting as the fact that we were blind to it is traumatizing before.
Right.
Because that also tells us, how, we're in 2020. Picture yourself in 3020 or in 20,
What new senses might we discover?
Is it, could it be that we're missing
Most of the
9/10 of physics?
Yeah.
That like there's a lot of physics out there that we're just blind to, completely oblivious to it.
Yeah.
And yet they're permeating us all the time.
Yeah, so it might be right in front of us.
So when you're thinking about premonitions,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of that is ascertainment bias. Like, yeah, every now and then you're like, oh, I remember my friend, and then my friend doesn't appear, and I'll forget that I remembered my friend. But every now and then my friend will actually appear. I'm like, oh my God, I thought about you a minute ago. You just called me. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, some of that is this, but some of that might be that there are within our brain sensors for waves that we emit that we're not even aware of. Mm-hmm. And this whole concept of when I hug my children, there's such an emotional transfer there that we don't comprehend. I mean, sure, yeah, of course, we're all like hardwired for all kinds of touchy-feely things. Between parents and kids, it's beautiful. Between partners, it's beautiful, etc. But then there are intangible aspects of human communication that I don't think it's unfathomable that our brain has actually evolved ways and sensors for it that we just don't capture. We don't understand the function of the vast majority of our neurons. And maybe our brain is already sensing it. But even worse, maybe our brain is not sensing it at all. And we're oblivious to this until we build a machine that suddenly is able to sort of capture so much more of what's happening in the natural world.
So what you're saying is physics is going to discover a sensor for love.
Maybe dogs are off scale for that. And we've been oblivious to it the whole time because we didn't have the right sensor.
Yeah.
And now you're going to have a little wrist that says, oh my God, I feel all this love in the house. I sense a disturbance in the force.
It's all around us. And dogs and cats will have zero.
None.
None.
It's just no signals.